Hi everybody, how are you? Today you are eating at April's. We were in my darling little kitchen and I'm going to prepare for you one of my favorite things to cook and something that my friends love to eat. It is my version of succotash. And this was a recipe that I developed after speaking with a friend of mine who is a chef, the divine Jules. Everybody loves Jules. And I had seen a Flemish engraving that was published in a book in 1588. The engraving was in a book called A Brief and True Report of the Newfoundland of Virginia, and the author was a Thomas Hariot, Hariot, and the engraver was Theodore de Bry. He had seen a drawing that was done by an American artist in watercolors. That artist was Mr. John White, and that particular watercolor was called Cooking in a Pot. And Mr. DeBry's engraving showed a couple of indigenous people, a gentleman and a lady, cooking in a large clay pot that was about as big as they were. And it looked like there was a hodgepodge of things simmering in that pot, lumps of this, that, and the other. But what really stood out in the drawing was a whole fish and a whole ear of corn. And one of the traditional foods of the Americas that was cooked pre-contact, but also very much by the early colonists and of course by the Victorians, and clear up until today, is the succotash. And succotash comes from a Narragansett word that means broken pieces of corn. Succotash is so much more than that, and everybody who cooks it has their own variation. The variation that I'm going to use today was developed from a brainchild with Jules and me. I said to her, what kind of fish do you think would have been used in that region in that historic period? And she said, do you know what I think? She said, I think they would have used a firm flesh fish, and in that region it might have been catfish. But one of the things that we discussed was that every time a dish like that was going to be made, it wouldn't be all the same ingredients. Like today, for example, we say, what do I want to cook today? What am I in the mood to eat? And then we look at our recipe books, we write down what we need, and we go to the store and we buy all of that stuff. While in the 1500s, people didn't go to the store and buy that. What they did was they looked and they saw what was seasonal, what they had on hand, and then they figured out what they could cook using that. So traditionally, succotash might not have tasted the exact same way every single time or had all the same things in it. Basically, what it is corn and beans mixed with whatever else you have. And in Victorian days, a lot of the recipes would call for salt pork. Um, but for some reason, some of the historic writings talked about indigenous people putting in fish, corn, and beans. So mine calls for catfish, corn, onions, tomatoes, and my favorite, pinto beans. Now, for me, when I'm telling you how to cook something, I'm not necessarily going to have measurements for you. Succotash is something that you really need to develop on your own to give your own flair to it. And you don't have to do it all the same way every time. You can use a variety of different kinds of beans. You can use pork or fish. You can try chicken if you want to. You can do anything you want to, or you can do a vegan recipe with no animal products at all. Okay, so let's get started. One of the tricks that you're going to learn when you're making any kind of a soup or a stew is you're going to want to use a larger pot than what you think you're going to need, because once you get started, when you're mixing everything together, you might get hungry and you might put in a little bit extra. The first thing I'm going to put in is my onions, and I've got the equivalent of 2 medium onions chopped here. So into the pan, that's going to go. Isn't that gorgeous? Now, one of the tricks that I've learned over the years with onions, Mom would say, just leave them, they'll break apart. Well, I'm too impatient for that. So this potato masher is your best friend. And you're just going to get in there and you're going to mash up your onions just like that. And that breaks them apart pretty easily. And it smells fantastic. Now, if you're like me and you cry really easily around onions, don't stick your head down in the pan like what I just did. Okay, so now we've got our onions broken apart a little better. And we're going to add the tomatoes. My favorite kind of a tomato to use for this is the Roma tomato, but you can use any tomatoes that you want. I chopped up 4 Roma tomatoes, and then I had 1 large tomato left over. So into the pan, that is going to go. All of those tomatoes. Now, you absolutely do not want to be stingy with onions or tomatoes when you're making this dish, because that's what's going to give you your flavor. This might look like a lot of tomatoes to some people, but it's really not that much. And what I'm doing right here is mixing this in. I'm just going to tilt the camera a little bit so that you can see there. You can see that a little better. And you can also see the mess that I have on this countertop. I've got my extra tomatoes here if I want more, and I've got my extra onions. When you're making a soup or a stew and you're not definitely using a definitive measurement, have plenty on hand in case you want to add more. Next, what I'm using today is frozen fresh corn. I prefer to use fresh corn on the cob for this and break the corn cobs into like 3 to 4 pieces and throw that in, but it's not in season right now. This is March the 1st. Soon. When we went to the grocery store last night, the fresh corn didn't look so great. I have found that the frozen ears of corn on the cob just don't taste right. You can use kernel corn from the can if you want to, but they have all kinds of sugar and salt added to that. And part of the purpose of cooking at home is to cook healthy. I'm going to show you the ingredients of this. Corn. See that? That's all it is corn. Simple enough. Now what I do is I just add how much I want. So I've got about 2/3 of this pack, and this is a 1 pound pack of corn. I'm going to put that over there. Next come the beans. You can use dried lima beans or dried pinto beans for this, but soak them overnight. Dried corn was a staple in the early Americas before canning started, of course. But this is just convenient for me. I have drained this and rinsed this. So into the pan that's going to go. And then what's going to really make this easy on you, this is a 4-pound bag of frozen catfish nuggets. And it's got some salt and some water and a little bit of a sodium product in this to help with preservation. But this is healthy, and of course this is from Alabama. I love Alabama. So if you don't have access to fresh catfish that you caught yourself, or you don't want to pay the prices at the butcher block, it was $8.99 for 4 pounds of this. And we're going to use about a pound. So I'll get maybe 1.33 pounds. I'll get 3 or 4 uses out of this bag. So it's $3 per stew kettle. And I'm just going to pour that frozen fish right in. Now, you want to have a pretty good medley of all of your different ingredients in here, because you don't want this dish to be overpowered by any one flavor. Your meat that you put in there should be your seasoning, but you don't want to feel like you're deprived of vegetables. Now, in my house, those of you who have eaten here with me know this, in my house we use our hands for everything. So I'm just going to get in there and I'm just going to mix this all up. And then I'm going to see what I've got and decide if I want more of anything. I prefer to put in 2 cans of beans with this because the beans just flavor this so well. But I have to go easy on beans for my husband's sake and my sake too. All right. So all mixed up. I can smell those onions. Got plenty of tomato in there. Now your tomato is going to give your broth a good color. Just rinse off my hands. You do not want to skimp on those tomatoes. Otherwise your broth is going to be watery and it's not going to be hearty. It's not going to be good. This is going to be a light broth because you're going to want to have plenty of that broth. But if you take a look at here, this is what we've got. You can see, you know, the fish doesn't look that fabulous right now. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to put a couple more chunks in it. But what's going to happen is you're going to cook this until the fish softens, starts to break apart a little bit, but you don't want to wait until it just becomes grainy and so separated that you can't get a good mouthful of fish. I'll go ahead and turn my stove on, and then I'm going to put some water in this. You're going to want to go above the level of the vegetables and the fish in this because you want plenty of broth, but you don't want to fill this pan to the tippy top, otherwise it's just not going to have much flavor. If you put in too much water, it's going to taste like water, and that's what you don't want. Here we go, kids. There we go. All right. So, here's what we have. Now for your seasonings. Now this is a pretty simple dish. A lot of your flavoring is going to come from your onions, from your beans, and from your fish. But if you don't put any salt or pepper on it, it's not going to taste like anything. Let's go ahead and throw some of that in there. You're going to want to go easy on the seasonings when you first get started because you can always add more later, but you can't take it away. Black pepper. We eat a lot of black pepper in this house, and you know what they say about pepper, that it's an aphrodisiac. And then red pepper, not too much. You don't want people's eyes running down their face with how spicy you make your food. It's not cute. It's not cute to overpower your food with spice. We went out to one of the area Indian restaurants. We love Indian food. And the food was so hot that I couldn't even get a full meal out of it. And I think you can tell by looking at me that I'm a big girl and I do like to eat a lot of food. Well, I didn't even get a third of a meal out of that. It is good for you to eat spicy foods and red pepper, but it is not good for you to overpower your body with too much spice. There's 2 kinds of red pepper I'm going to show you. This one I am crazy about. It's from Adam Foods. This is African red pepper. And this is distributed through Connecticut, but it is African style. And you get this at your African markets. If you can get your hands on this, this is much, much hotter than your plain old ground red pepper that you find at your regular grocery store. And of course you can add your plain old red pepper until the cows come home and make it super strong. But this stuff by Adam just has a little bit more of a kick to it, and you have to go really easy on this. So I'm going to use just a teeny little bit of both. Did you see that? I went really easy on that. And then regular red pepper, just a couple more little sprinkles of that. And as I said with the spices, I can always add more later. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stir this up. There we go. Got my wooden spoon here. Every country cook has a stash of wooden spoons. Now folks, we're about 15 minutes into this video, and it's probably probably going to take another 30 minutes or so for this to cook. So what I'll do is I'm going to shut this off because I'm about as technologically advanced as the hand plow. I'm sure I could learn more technology and cut videos and splice them together and everything, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this two-part series for this succotash. Miss Jules, I could not have done this without that wonderful conversation with you. And I'm going to tell y'all where you can go and take a look at those engravings that I was talking about. A school out in, I believe it's North Carolina, has been kind enough to post on www.learnnc.org/lp/multimedia/6232. The article is titled "Their Seething of Their Meat in Earthen Pots," and you can actually read the whole publication, the entire book that these original engravings were put in, tons of the engravings by Mr. DeBry. You can find that on a website called Documenting the American South. And the HTML can be accessed at docsouth.unc/nc/Harriet, Hariot is how to spell that, /Harriet.html. And we are going to shut this off for a bit, and I will come back and you will see the results of this gorgeous stew, and if I decide to add anything or not very soon. Thank you very much.